Well, happy Valentine's Day. I'll never forget my favorite Valentine card a friend of mine gave to her husband, and on the outside it says, "You, sweetheart, are the answer to my prayers." When you open it up, it says, "But you're not what I prayed for." How many of you can relate to that? How many of you can relate to many blessings coming into your life and it's like, no, that was not what I prayed for? We can relate to that. Today is the third week in a series that is based on the season that we're in, which is called the Season of Nonviolence. It begins at the end of January and runs through the early part of May 4th. It is the dates of the assassination of Gandhi and of Martin Luther King Jr. Hence, it's on the front of your program, that picture about the Season of Nonviolence. And so we've been talking about courage and different ideas that lead us into nonviolence that ideally leads us to experience peace. We started by talking about courage, and then we talked about communication, and this week we talk about compassion. How many of you can remember an experience where someone demonstrated compassion to you and it really made a change in your life? Can you think of a time when you did something out of compassion and the other person told you it really made a difference in their life? Yeah. That compassion is a powerful energy. My partner told me a story about compassion. She said several years ago her father had a heart attack. He has since made his transition, but at this particular time he had a heart attack. And the whole family, of course, very upset, went to the hospital, and she had been in the hospital room with him and left and went out and was going down the elevator. And she said she was in the elevator trying to hold it together, but just about to lose it. And there was a gentleman in the elevator, and she said he had on a backpack. And during that short elevator ride, he took off the backpack, unzipped a little zipper, pulled out a little round token that had an angel on it, put it in her hand and curled it up and said, "Everything's going to be all right." And she said her father got better and things were all right. He said, "Everything's going to be all right." And she said, I've always wondered if that was really a man or an angel that did that. And in Unity, we look at the Bible and many things as the metaphysical meaning, and an angel is really a messenger of God. Well, would you turn to one person beside you and say, you too are a messenger of God? That you too are a messenger of God. And would you say for yourself, I am a messenger of God. I am a messenger of God. And it calls us to redefine perhaps what we have understood and what we think God may be or God may not be, but that we are all messengers. We are all the hands, the heart of God. And this energy of compassion is a unique energy because it is compassion that allows us to know that we are deeply human, connected one to another. The word compassion actually means to suffer together. I think perhaps the way to really understand that is to say to be in the human predicament together. To be in the spiritual human experience together, that the compassion says that we are aware of our shared humanity. That we all know what it is to have joys and to have sorrow. We all know what it is to be on top of the world and to be at the bottom of the world. We all know what it feels like, hopefully, to have a heart that is full of love and probably to have had our heart broken. And we all know what it is to live with the idea of impermanence, that this too shall pass, that all that we see and know will eventually pass. And so that keeps us deeply human. But compassion is also a quality of our soul. Because if God is love, then love is everywhere. And if God is spirit and we are all a part of God, then we are all a part of the spirit of love. And that means that love is expressed as compassion. And so compassion is that bridge between our shared humanity and our essential nature as a spiritual being. It really keeps us in that place between both. Would you show me the first slide? When I was thinking this week about what is compassion, this is the definition that came to me. Compassion recognizes our connection. Compassion honors and nurtures our connection. And compassion amplifies our sense of connection and expands our sense of oneness. That all of these things are born out of compassion. And compassion flows in three directions. Compassion flows from yourself to another. Compassion flows from another to yourself. And compassion flows from yourself to where? Yourself. From yourself to yourself. And when compassion flows from yourself to yourself, you position yourself in a place of realizing that I'm more than this flesh and bones. I'm more than my thoughts. I'm more than my limited beliefs. I'm more than meets the eye. That compassion can come through this self back to you. It's like a circle, but it's the circle of wholeness. It's the circle of completion. It is the infinite self, the divine, the Christ self, the Buddha self, however you label it. It is that self loving itself through you. Compassion is a profound energy, and today we explore what it means to really bathe ourselves in that energy. That's what compassion is, but then where does it come from? Well, it comes from our soul. It comes from our nature. Science has long looked at the ideas of love and oneness, compassion, empathy, trying to understand, is this a learned behavior or is it something that we're born with? Well, I believe it's both. We're absolutely wired as individual beings trying to protect ourselves, trying to survive. We have this old brain, this fight or flight. I mean, think about it. Think about you're driving your car, you're singing, and all of a sudden you see brake lights, and just like that, you stop on brakes. If an alarm went off, we'd all jump up. We are wired to react and respond immediately to keep ourselves safe. And that's a good thing. But we're also wired to know that in the grand scheme of things, that my safety cannot be borne at the expense of your safety. That we are all truly in this together. So knowing that that is where it comes from. And so understanding that science, was a really interesting study that I found that took place at the University of Chicago. They've done a lot of research. There's the lead neuroscientist there, Dr. Peggy Mason, wrote this article, which I thought was humorous and interesting. What they did, it says, researchers placed a free-roaming rat in an arena with a caged rat. Over the course of several days, the free rats realized they could nudge open a door and release the caged rat. After figuring this out, they did so repeatedly, day after day. Then they did what the scientists referred to as a celebration. The trapped rat runs around the arena, and the free rat appears to be excited and runs after the trapped rat. They play a little game together after they've freed the trapped one. But the scientists said, well, this behavior alone is not enough to show that rats are empathetic, she said. The rats could be releasing their caged cohorts simply for companionship. And so they did another test, so that if they freed the rat, the one who freed the rat would then go into an isolated cage and be isolated. They couldn't do the happy dance, and they were not together. Day after day, the same things happened. They still would always release them. It didn't mean that they needed to play together. So then they upped it a notch, and they said, but what if we put chocolate? A rat's favorite food is chocolate, so hide it. So they said, what if, for the free rats, we put chocolate, some little hidden chocolates, and they have a choice? They still did the same thing. However, they would eat some of the chocolate, free the rats, and then save some for the other ones. But the funny line is what is funny. It said, there was also a difference in the behavior of male rats and female rats. The female rats, once they opened the door every day and within a few minutes, Dr. Mason said. But the male rats would occasionally take a day off. Honey, did you remember to free the rat? We are truly wired to help each other out, to help us get out of our conundrums and our predicaments. There was another interesting thing that I saw several years ago. You may have seen it in 2012. Would you show me the next slide? Lawrence Anthony was the long-standing head of conservation for the game reserve in South Africa called Tahula Tahula. He's the founder of the Earth Care organization. This man was known as the Elephant Whisperer because he freed many elephants, he introduced humane behavior to the elephants, and he lived on this reserve in South Africa. When he died in 2012, this is what they wrote in the paper. "A good man died suddenly," said Rabbi Layla Berner, "and from miles and miles away, 2 herds of elephants, sensing they had lost a beloved human friend, moved in solemn, almost funeral procession to make a call on the bereaved family of the deceased man's home. For 12 hours, 2 herds of South African elephants slowly made their way through the Zululand bush until they reached the house of the late author Lawrence Anthony, the conservationist who saved their lives. If there ever were a time when we can truly sense the wondrous interconnectedness of all beings, it is when we reflect on the elephants of Tahula Tahula. A man's heart stops beating, and hundreds of elephants' hearts start grieving." Isn't that beautiful? This man's oh so abundantly loving heart offered healing to those elephants, and now they came to pay loving homage to their friend. We are truly one interconnected family. There is something that speaks heart to heart. You know, the greatest language on earth is the language of the heart. And as we cultivate that language of the heart, that's how peace, that's how nonviolence ensues, one heart and one mind at a time. And yet compassion is about being anchored in wisdom. You know, they say the longest journey we will ever take is from the head to the heart. It's to unite our thinking nature with our feeling nature. Because the thinking nature alone can be cold and callous. The feeling nature alone can have no boundaries and be too vulnerable or too overbearing. And so compassion anchors the two of those together so that it's not about letting people off the hook and not about holding people accountable. It's about doing whatever needs to be done with compassion. Compassion that flows from us, compassion that we're willing to receive, and compassion that comes back and ministers unto our own self, if you will. The same study said that infants as old as 18 months old, as young as 18 months old, would try to help, aware of adults in distress, would try to help them. So even an 18-month-old child is already trying to help someone in distress. That our brain actually knows how to do this and completely knows how to do it. Would you show me the next slide? Every major tradition teaches what we call the golden rule. Say it with me. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But it is fascinating to know that that exact same teaching is found in basically every spiritual tradition. That it is the crux, it is the backbone on which these, Buddhism says it this way, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do naught unto others which would cause you pain if done unto you. Native American, respect for all is the foundation of life. Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. That this idea of doing unto others as we would have others do unto us, it truly is the crux of the spiritual life. The next slide is a quote by Eric Butterworth in his book, Discover the Power Within. He says, "The hope of mankind today, lies in the great undiscovered depths within, yet it is not so much within as it is a deeper level of man." I was meditating one time. How many of you know what Russian nesting dolls look like? You've seen these things. They make them in Santa Clauses and everything, but you have the little teeny one in the inside, and then there's one just like it, slightly bigger and bigger and bigger. I was meditating one time, and all of a sudden I saw just this little Darlene. Do you ever feel like a little version of yourself? And in my time of meditation, I then began to see it myself unfold, like there's a bigger silhouette, and then a bigger, and then a bit, and until it got where there were no boundaries anymore. And I thought, that's what the spiritual journey is about. It's about realizing that we are all of these. That in our human moments, sometimes we feel like I'm the most isolated, small, little individual, fearful or however I feel. And yet to know at that very same time, even though I may feel that way, there's more to me than I imagine. That there's greater and greater dimensions of my being, and I can express at different levels. That's what compassion is to really realize that what we're unfolding is deeper and deeper dimensions of ourselves. So how do we do this? For me, spirituality is all about making it practical. There's a 4-step process that I have used and that I'd like to share with you of how we can do this to cultivate compassion, and it's really an awareness practice in your own life. And the first step is notice difficulty. Now, when we say notice difficulty, it could happen in someone else or it could be happening in your life. Notice difficulty within yourself. I'll give you an example. When I was here for my tryout weekend and I was flying home, Pam and Charlie took me to the airport in Greenville-Spartanburg, and I went and got my ticket, and I noticed the person beside me was having difficulty. I noticed difficulty. And it pulled on my heartstrings. I don't know why, but it just pulled on my heartstrings. There was a woman at the counter beside as I was getting my ticket. She was trying to get hers. She was frustrated. The person behind the desk was frustrated. She started crying. She was fumbling, and she grabbed her stuff, and she stepped away. And my heart started beating fast. So after noticing difficulty, I noticed the second step is notice how you feel. I noticed that within inside of me, something was telling me I needed to respond here. And so I just nonchalant just stepped over and said, "Is there anything I can help you with?" And she looked up and she said, "I'm just so frustrated." She said, "We just buried my father. I just packed everything in his house. I've had to rush here. I feel like they're wanting things I don't have." And she said, "I got to fly back home." And she just burst into tears, and I just said, "Would you like a hug?" And I hugged her, and she said, "Thank you." And I went on about my way until we both were in Atlanta. When our connection was in Atlanta, it just so happened the president was in the airspace, and so we got stuck in the airport for a while. In that huge Atlanta airport, who do you think I would find myself beside again? That lady. We had more time to connect, more time to share, and it was a beautiful experience. So when you notice difficulty, number 2, you notice your feeling. And then number 3, notice your impulse. What is my impulse here? Am I feeling like there's something I need to do? Am I feeling like I need to run? I want to run. And just bring mindfulness to it. How many times do we see a person on the street, we notice it, we feel it, and we're like, "God, get me out of here." Just pay attention. It's not about judgment. It's just about noticing and then asking ourselves, what act of compassion do I need to take now? Sometimes the act of compassion is just to speak back to yourself and you say, "You know what? That scares me. That could be me." You see, the greatest thing that we can learn, I believe, when we start working with compassion is the mantra, "just like me." That this person is trying to get by in life just like me. This person has their good days and their bad days. The Buddhists say it this way, just like me, this person is seeking happiness in his or her life. Just like me, this person is trying to avoid suffering in his or her life. Just like me, this person has known sadness, loneliness, despair. Just like me, this person is seeking to fulfill their needs. Just like me, this person is learning about life. That just like me, and as we begin to pay attention to that, we bring mindfulness. And if we choose, maybe it's for me to respond, maybe it's not for me to respond. But the main thing is, what do we do inside? Because I'll tell you another experience this week I had. I was in a store these things seem to always happen when you're in the 10 items or less line or 20 items or less line. Because when you're in that line, your hope is to get in and get out. You're typically in a hurry. I was in a hurry. I wanted to get in. I wanted to get out. I'm in this line. And I noticed the person in front of me had coupons. It took a while. The clerk was snippy. They were snippy. So when I got there, I'm putting my stuff up, and I noticed the person's not doing anything, but there's a cell phone hidden, and she's actually texting. And I stood there a minute, and the first thought that came up was, really? I wish I could say it was bless her heart. It wasn't. I'm in a hurry, and I'm thinking, are you seriously texting? And that was coming up inside of me. So, I noticed difficulty. I noticed I had a feeling about it. I have a desire, I have an impulse. Part of me wants to go find the store manager and, rat them out. And then I remember, but just like me, I don't know the story. I don't know what's going here. She could have a sick child at home. I don't know. And so compassionate action, the first step, compassionate action is often to stop that train of thought. You see, the greatest thing we can do, the greatest act of compassion is stop that train of thought. And so for me, it was just to take a deep breath and say, okay, this is inconvenient. It's not ideal. Just like me, I don't know what's going on. But I need to stop this train of thought because I'm very quickly getting irritated. I'm very quickly headed down a place I don't want to be. Life is way too short for me to spend a long time on that track. And you see, compassion brought me back to that place and let her deal with whatever hers was without me needing to define it or make her bad or label it. That's the gift of compassion. To notice the difficulty, to notice how I'm feeling. Notice, am I called to respond or do something? And then take compassionate action. Sometimes compassionate action is to put an angel coin in a person's hand and say, it's going to be all right. Sometimes compassionate action is to follow that impulse and say, are you okay? Do you need a hug? Sometimes compassionate action is to slow down a little bit and really look in the eyes and connect. Most often, that compassionate action will be to stop that train of thinking that is causing separation within our own self and with others. Would you give me that song? I want to tell you a true story. And I want this to become an experience because I'm going to ask you to pay attention. Just close your eyes as I tell you the story. And I want you to pay attention to how you feel throughout the whole story. So if you close your eyes, there's a train that runs from Seattle to Tacoma, and it makes one stop in between. And the 6 o'clock train is usually very quiet. The train is full, but the people that are on that train are glad they can close their eyes and not worry about driving, and so it's real quiet, it's still dark, people are trying to sleep. Or they have a cup of coffee and a newspaper, and they're using that time to read quietly. On this particular morning, when the train made its stop in between, on stepped a man and 3 children. And within a matter of seconds, the whole train was annoyed. One of the children were running up and down the aisles, stepping on people's feet, bumping their coffee. The smallest child is crying, and the father is just sitting there, not really paying any attention at all. The people around are getting quite annoyed because the father's not doing anything about it, or the man, they don't even know if he's a father. He's not doing anything. Trying to calm the one baby a little bit, but the others are just out of control. And finally, after one of the children hits a cup and knocks over some coffee, one of the men says, "Sir, would you please pay attention and do something to your children?" And the guy says, What? And he said, "Sir, your children are disrupting the whole train. Would you please do something about it?" And the man took a deep breath and he said, "I'm so sorry." He said, we just left the hospital. My wife was in a car accident last night, and she just died. He said, I don't know what in the world I'm going to do. Everyone around that man changed just like that. From being annoyed, now compassion began to flow. Hearts were opened. The same people that were annoyed now were saying, can we help you with your children? What do you need? They start pulling out phones, taking names down. You see, so it is in our life that throughout our daily life, we're all in this spiritual human experience. And no matter how the story ends, our responsibility is always, where is this train of thought taking me? And how do I bring myself back to compassion? And so we take that breath and we say, just like me. Just like me. Sometimes we show up at our best and sometimes not. And I choose to take my own self back to that place of love, to that place of empathy. And in so doing, I allow it to move me. The compassion is really about moving us from the inside out, that we become the way. We get out of the way, and we become the way for love and light to come through. And so I invite you to open your eyes and to look at the words on the screen. And I want to teach you a song that anchors this in, that talks about we're part of one family. We're part of one family, the family of God, breathing one spirit, living one life. We're in this together, finding our way. Let love be our guiding light, and on course we'll stay. Join me now. We're part of one family, the family of God.